Hello and welcome or welcome back. This is Johanna. I have no credentials. I'm just using the IB book, and I'm going to tell you about the first higher level part in Chapter 1. The next video will be on the rest of Chapter 1, and then Chapter 1 will be over. So, the HL part is called Concepts in Qualitative Research. So, the first thing they talk about is that there has been a debate among qualitative researchers, which is between reliability and validity and whether you can use these concepts in qualitative research. So, reliability is if the research methods and techniques can produce consistent data. Meanwhile, validity is if the research explains what it actually aimed to explain. So the IB has decided to follow the same ideas that were in the study by Ritchie and Lewis 2014. So here I wrote aim, but I don't really mean aim. I just mean like what they were saying, their main points. So researchers can only understand behavior through the participants' interpretations. In experimental research, you measure the effect of an independent variable on a dependent variable. Qualitative research, on the other hand, uses an interpretive approach, however, should be as objective as possible and get feedback from the participants. A combination of both qualitative and quantitative methods may be necessary and helpful. So this was like their main ideas, and the IB has decided to follow this approach. So when you talk about qualitative and quantitative research and validity and reliability and interpretation, this is what the IB book states, so this is what you should state as well. Now, if we move on to the next topic, which is differences between qualitative and quantitative data, the main things are that quantitative data is shown in numbers. It is easy to summarize. The data is meant to be generalized beyond the sample. So if you use a sample of girls, you should be able to generalize it to boys, maybe. I mean, it depends what you're researching, but that was just an example. And the samples are supposed to be representative of the population. So that would be, you could, for instance, have slightly more males than females in your study, because in the world today, there are actually slightly more males. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that. That seems sort of, there's a very little difference, but that was just an example. And in qualitative data, you get textual data, you get text, you get manuscripts, transcripts, stuff like that, and it's very time consuming. It is, when you gather the data, you have a direct interaction with participants, you have smaller samples, mostly due to the fact that it's so time consuming, and samples are chosen because of a characteristic, not because they statistically represent the population. Okay, so generalizing from qualitative research. So first of all, there's representational generalizations, which is that the findings can be applied to populations from which it was drawn. So what you found, let's say you're doing it about Alzheimer's. You can apply what you found to everybody who has Alzheimer's. That would be representational generalization. Now, there's also inferential generalization, which is that the findings can be applied to a setting outside of the setting of the study. So let's say you do your study in a lab. You should be able to apply your findings to real life, essentially, or to a different country, or wherever you please. Theoretical generalization means that the concepts that you find from your studies can be used to develop further theories or already existing theories. Yeah. So there are also ethical considerations in qualitative research. Most of the ethical considerations are the same in qualitative and quantitative, but because of qualitative's possibilities, like how you can have participant and non-participant observations and covert and overt, there are some very specific Rules to follow. Let's talk about informed consent. So as I said in the previous episode, there is sort of a rule where you can avoid this ethical, or there are like exceptions to the rule where if you're observing people in a place where they already expect to be observed, it's okay. Well, that's a debate, but that's a general rule. So the participants have to know that participation is voluntary and that they can withdraw their consent at any point. So they could say, oh, I'm sorry, I actually don't want to be here. And it's also important that if you are under 16 years old, that you get parental consent as well. Another ethical consideration is to protect from harm. You can't apply undue. Undue means like not necessary and like not justified pressure to get information that a participant doesn't want to share. Participants also have to be aware of the fact that they can withdraw any information. Like after an interview, you can say, actually, I changed my mind. That is very sensitive and very private to me, and I don't actually want to share this and that part, essentially. And that participants should be aware of the topics before they actually go to the interview. There are also a lot of things within this where if you can tell as an interviewer, if you can tell that the participant is uncomfortable, you can try to change topic or maybe even end the interview. And also that if you go into very deep or like heavy topics, that you should end the interview with some lighter topics. These are just like common sense type things. So another thing is confidentiality. This means that the research data will not be known to anyone outside of the study. Details may be changed within the reports so that nobody can identify who you are. Like there shouldn't be any indicators to exactly who you are. Like obviously it might say, oh, it's a female, but it shouldn't be like, you shouldn't be able to tell like, oh, I know exactly who this is. And then another thing that goes along with that is anonymity. This essentially is the way the data is stored after the research. So first of all, you should be anonymous in the reports. But what is important with this is that if there are any videos taken of observations or interviews, that they should be destroyed after a transcript has been made of what was said. And if the researcher decides to keep these videos, it's important that the participants are informed about that and have written consent or have consented to them keeping the videos. Because, as I stated before, no one who is a part of the research team should be able to tell who is who and what happened, and nobody should be able to find out, because it might be very sensitive information. Now, let's talk about sampling techniques for qualitative research. So there are three main ones. There is purposive sampling, which is you target a particular group of people with a characteristic. So essentially you find, oh, I want to test people with only one arm. You find people with only one arm and you ask them to join. That's essentially it. However, there might be sampling bias because of diversity. I wrote because of diversity because, for instance, you have people with only one arm. It's already going to be quite hard to find these people, but then you might only find males with only one arm or females with only one arm. So then you're still missing a level of diversity. Or let's say like people of different ethnicities with only one arm. That's a very weird example, but I think you understand what I'm saying. So snowball sampling is the next one. That is when participants are asked if they know more potential participants. This is very cost efficient, but there may be sample bias and issues with confidentiality because, first of all, participants will be aware of who other participants are because they recommended them. So this is essentially taking a person and asking them like, hey, do you know anyone who's like just like you? Which can also lead to the sampling bias because then you might get a lot of people who are very similar and don't actually represent the entire population of people with that characteristic. It only represents like a certain type of person, which could be an issue. So the last one is opportunity sampling. This is essentially when you just select people who are available. You ask them, can you do this? If they say yes, they're in it, It could be anyone. I mean, obviously they have to fit whatever research you're doing, but, there's no other, like, thought to it. Now, the last thing in this higher level chapter is credibility in qualitative data. So before anyone says anything, I don't have whiteout. That's why I used some tape. That's a little funny. But yes. So credibility. The concept of internal validity is used in the research. So as I stated before, validity was that the research explains what it is intended to. So you have to find internal validity. So it is credible when the findings reflect the meanings as they are described by the participant. As you know, in qualitative data, you're really trying to look from the participant's perspective. So if the interpretations are similar, like if you are supposed to show your research to the participants to get feedback after you were done with it, if your interpretation is similar to what the participants or interpretation is, like they read your paper and they think, yeah, I agree with this, like this is what I meant, then it is credible. Also, you might use, instead of a participant and a researcher, you might take two different researchers, make them analyze the data, and if they both come to the same interpretation, then it is credible. Triangulation can increase credibility. So what is triangulation? Triangulation is cross-checking information and conclusions in research. So you can use triangulation in many aspects. For example, data triangulation is using many different types of data or sets of data. And method triangulation is using many different methods. So you could use a quantitative method and a qualitative method, and if they both lead to the same result, then you can determine that, oh, it's not because of the method I'm using, it's because these results are like actually real, like this is actually showing something. There's researcher triangulation, which is what I was talking about before, when you use like two or more researchers. And theory triangulation is when you look at the data from different approaches. So for instance, the IB focuses on the biological, sociocultural, and cognitive approach. So if I looked at a incident from, or not an incident, if I looked at a case from, or a study from both the biological and cognitive approach, then I have used theory triangulation. And that was actually it for the first higher level concept. In the next video, we'll be going through understanding interviews, observations, and case studies. And then after that, chapter 1 is done. And then we only have chapter 2 left, which is annoying. And then we get to like the actual like fun stuff, I guess. I mean, fun, that's up to you, but yeah. Also, I'm a little bit annoyed right now because I spilled water on my notebook, which is really sad because I literally just wrote these notes, and this is like my rewriting of my notes. So, rest in peace, that one page. It's not that bad, I'm being dramatic, it's like just a little splash, but I'm still sad about it. Okay, goodbye. Thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe, like, comment, follow me at Johanna Frennert on Instagram. I hope you learned something. Goodbye!